I'm making a video today on how to repair a hole in drywall. Now, as you can see, this hole here will fit a fist through. Fair sized hole. So what we want to do to start is to get this hole into a shape that we can actually repair relatively easily. Now, this is a circular hole, obviously, that I cut when I was doing some electrical work here to fish some wires down. So it's going to be pretty difficult to get a piece of drywall to repair this. So what we want to do is make this a rectangular or a square hole. Now, I could take a tape measure and just measure with the distance across. Now, the problem if I did that would be I could measure across here and mark it, and then I could measure across or down this way and mark it, but I'm not going to end up with a 90-degree angle. So ideally what you want is a square, which I have here. Now this whole square is all rusted up, so what I did was I marked a 5-inch mark here. I'm up on a kitchen counter, so I gotta balance myself strategically to show you this. But basically, the 5 inches from here to here will definitely cover the size of the hole horizontally. And if I take the square this way, we can see that 5 inches will definitely fill the hole that way. And it doesn't really matter, within reason, how big we make this piece. So, and another thing, there's a stud right here. That doesn't really matter. We're going to cut a 5x5 hole this way to repair the drywall. But I'm just mentioning that because in this case what I'm going to do is take the drywall over a little bit under the stud, because then I'll have a solid piece behind here to mount to if I want to. So, I position my square a fair little bit above the drywall, something like that. And what I'm going to do is just mark right there. It's the end of the 5 inches. Mark that across. My pencil is dying on me here. So there's a 5-inch horizontal line, and then I'm going to mark it down 5 inches vertically to where I have that marked in the square. So if I take that away, we can see that we have a 90-degree angle here. Now I'm going to take my square the other way. Here's my 5-inch mark on my square. Line that up here at the edge. I'm just going to mark my pencil line so you can see where that ended. Right there, 5 inches. And 5 inches ended over here. Move my camera a little bit there. I think I might be losing that part. So, now, if I make that 90-degree angle that way, take my 5-inch mark, line it up here, line it up down below, mark it, and voila, I have a 5x5 square marked in the drywall. So that's going to be relatively easy to cut to replace that. So now what I'm going to do is very carefully taking your knife and just going to start to mark that. Cut it down, cut it horizontally, and I'm not going to make you watch while I keep doing this, but as you continue to cut here, it's going to get a little bit deeper every time. Just going lightly the first couple of times. Once you cut it in and the blade sinks in, then you can kind of apply more pressure then. Get that, and then we go down this way. So I'm just going to keep doing that, and we'll show you the end result. So I've been continuing to cut around this, just going each side, one to the next, like so, until, let's give that a little shake there, and we can see that that's just about ready to come out. The moment of truth is about to arrive here, I think. We're just about through. Watch your fingers when you're doing this. Give it another little cut at the corner there, because they tend to stick a bit. Get that little shake. Seems to be caught up here, so again, make sure your fingers are out of the way. Alright. So now I pull that out, and we have an even piece that's 5 inches by 5 inches that we're going to pop in here. So now these edges of the drywall along here, I'm going to take my knife on an angle like this and just start to go out a little bit from the edge. That's because I don't want these sticking out when I'm trying to repair this. Now this drywall is a little damp, so it's not going to cut so easy, but if you can see what I'm doing, I got the knife just cutting down along the edge like that, and do the same way here, so that when I put my 5 inch by 5 inch piece in to replace or to cover this hole, these are going to be a little bit flat, angled in like so. Let's go like that, and I'm going to do that around the whole edge here. Get rid of these pieces here that are sticking up and would be hard to cover it in with the filler. So now the whole hole has been cut out and angled in, so there's no burrs or anything like that sticking out from the edge of the drywall. So here I have a spare piece of drywall, and over here we can see my 5 inch mark there, my other 5 inch mark down here. So place my pencil on the edge of that mark. So basically what we're doing is we're just going to create a piece to fit that hole. Flip your square over, put the 5 inch mark down there. There's my pencil line here. Line that up. Line it up without moving the camera, hopefully. So here I have a spare piece of drywall, and hopefully this will show up on my rusted out old square here, but there's the 5 inch mark on that side and the 5 inch mark down here. So we're going to create our 5 by 5 piece to fill in the hole we just made. So that's that way. Take a square and just position those marks at the end. Hopefully those pencil marks will come out. They ended right here and there. So there's my 5 inch mark on the square. Put that down that way. And the other 5 there, mark it, and there you go. So there we have our piece to fill in the hole we created. Now I'm going to try to just basically we're going to do the same thing as what we did in the wall now. Watching your fingers, obviously. Lightly start to cut that out. As I said, you don't want to put a whole lot of pressure the first couple times. You just want to make a light knife mark. Oops. That you can follow as you cut this out. So just continue to do that, and I'll cut that out. Okay, I'm going to try to do this without moving the camera. You might have noticed I put a piece of board underneath this drywall because I don't want to cut into my floor. Keep going around there, cutting that out. Eventually, that'll pop out. And sometimes, after you've done it a couple times, it might be just as easy to flip it over, as you can see where your marks are, as they came through the back of the drywall, and cut it from the other side, like so. Again, watch your fingers. I'm kind of hurrying this a little bit just because I don't want to make this video too long, but do it slower than this if you haven't done it before. And piece should pop out. Now when I get this out, what I want to do on the front of this, because this part is going to be going in to fill our hole, I'm going to want to angle this so again that there's no edges here popping up that I'm going to have to sand down a whole lot. So I'm just going to take it this way, kind of cut down the outside edge as I try to keep from hitting my camera. So by getting rid of this edge, that outside paper covering on the drywall is not going to be sticking up. And then I'm just going to take the whole piece, just skim a little off the edge. We actually could have made the piece a little bit smaller than 5x5, but I will generally cut it the same size. Just take it like that, take a little off it. Probably should have done that first because now I'm going to have to take my edge down a bit. But basically, because we're going to be using filler to join this piece of drywall to the actual wall, we want this piece to be a little bit smaller. And there we have it. So now we have our piece of drywall cut to fit our hole, like so. Little space around the edges, which we want. It's not like we have to force that in there. We don't want to have to do that. So now we need to mount that to the wall itself. And what I like to do is take a paint stick and put it in behind the wall like that, and then up in behind the gyprock or the drywall, whatever, and that's going to give us something to mount our spare piece to. And you want to kind of do it in such a way as you have roughly the same amount of the paint stick or whatever type of wood you're going to use at the top and the bottom. So I don't know if this is all going to come out in the camera, but if I mark it around here and up there, that gives me about 3 inches on the top and 3 inches on the bottom of this piece of wood that's going to go down in behind the gyprock. So now that I have my little mark, I'm gonna put that down, way down inside the wall, and then I'm gonna move it up till my thumb is at that mark. You probably can't see the mark, but my thumb is positioned at the mark there right now. So I'll take it like that, and that's going to be in behind the wall itself, and that's what we're going to mount our spare piece to. So holding that out, I'm going to make a pencil mark about half the width of the stick at each side, because once we put our spare piece in here, we're going to lose track of where that is. So my mark, as you can see, is lined up with the middle of the paint stick. So now holding that out, putting a little bit of pressure out this way, I know that the bottom of this comes down about 3 inches. So I'm just going to take a drywall screw, push it in lightly there, and another one. 2 of them like that. Couple of them on top. Push them into place. Holding it with my fingers to keep a little pressure on that paint stick. A little bit more pressure on the paint stick. Keep screwing that drywall screw in until it actually goes so that if I run my finger over the gyprock there, the drywall screw is below the top of the gyprock there. Now again, same thing on top. I'm going to double up and have 2 screws here. Hopefully I can do this without moving that camera. So I'm going to have a screw on the top, 2 screws on the top, 2 screws on the bottom. Tighten that right in there nice and snug. And as I say, get that drywall screw below the surface, and that way when we're filling it, that screw's not going to be sticking out there. So now we have the paint stick secured. Here's our spare piece. I'm just going to position that like so. Kind of move it so that there's about the same amount of space on all the different edges. Take a gyprock screw, push it into place. Like to screw it in at the top just to kind of keep it secure to start with. And now I'm going to put a couple more drywall screws there. So at this point we have our piece in place, relatively secure. I'm going to take some fiberglass tape, position that along each edge. And I'm going to try to not overlap the tape, because when I'm using the filler, if I overlap this tape here, it's going to be just an extra bump that I got to try to fill in. So now, rub that down like that. Oh, reposition that. Cut that off there. And when I was talking about the part about not overlapping the fiberglass tape, what I mean is, here's the edge of the fiberglass here. Everybody's got a different method for doing this, but I'm going to take the one that I'm going to put horizontally and just line it up with that. And here's my vertical piece here ending along here, so I'm going to cut it there. Everybody's got their own technique, but I don't like to overlap the stuff too much, because this seems like more work when you're trying to level it out. So right now we got, let's push that into place. Take this, hopefully I'm not covering the camera here. Push that down, cut it there, and oops. So, we got that in place. We're ready for some compound. So now that we have our fiberglass tape in place here, I'm going to get up on the kitchen counter and try to fill this in. We're going to fill this in with all-purpose drywall compound, which is basically this. And I am not particularly good at this, but I've done it and it tends to look fairly good at the end of it. So I'll take something like that. And I just kind of push it down onto the tape to keep it in place, because if you start trying to rub this over that fiberglass tape right off the bat, that tape will tend to come off. So I'll just take, as I say, a bunch of it and just push down at the corners, different spots like that. Keep that tape in place, and then you can kind of start to fill it in. This is an acquired skill that I don't really have, but as I say, I have done it and it's come out pretty good. And because of the fact that I basically am relatively cheap, and it's hard to get guys to do this because they're all so busy, you have to do this type of thing and take your time at it. I'm sure I'm going to take some flack from guys that are good at this for my methods, but I think in the end it's going to look alright. And I just keep going like that, fill in that hole with drywall, screw there, get rid of the excess in the bucket. Basically I'm just going like that to get rid of the excess on that trowel there. Go down that way, over this way. I think you get the idea. Trying to keep it all fairly symmetrical. Not a real big deal, but now once you get it all in, I'm going to go this way, and this will just cover the whole. That, as you can see, goes across the whole span of the 5 inches, like that. So now I'm going to let that dry. Once the filler has dried, as it has now, I usually will take a big enough piece of wood to cover the area, if not just to get over the main edges. Wrap a piece of sandpaper around it, and just sand that down so that it's flat. Get it ready for another coat of the filler. Okay, so now I'm going to take the smaller edge of my trowel, put some filler just along the spots that are kind of sticking out there. Not going to put as much as the last time, just go along like that. So basically the more coats you do of this, the nicer job you're going to get, and you're going to be using less and less filler every time. As I say, this is not particularly a skill I'm all that great at, but just keep going over it. I'm going to wipe off the excess in my bucket of filler here. Clean that off a bit there. And hopefully that shows that you can see it's getting smoother there. And now let that dry and we'll sand that again. Finally here, I'm going to take a smaller piece of wood with some sandpaper. Just get rid of those rough edges. Pretty good and flat. You probably see a trend here. Basically what we're doing is just sanding a bit, putting a bit of filler, a little less every time. That's really flat now. There's just a little groove there. I might take my trowel without hitting that camera, hopefully. Put a little bit in there. Let that dry. Run my little block, small block of wooden sandpaper over that again. And that is basically the process that Backyard Mech uses for filling a large hole in a piece of drywall.